The massive space station floated in the dark void between three dying stars. Its metal walls were covered with weapons that could destroy entire planets. Admiral Tae-min walked through the long corridors wearing his black uniform with gold marks that showed his high rank. He had 4 strong arms and gray skin that looked like old leather. His red eyes glowed as he thought about the big meeting that would happen today. For over 3,000 years, the races of the galaxy had been fighting against something terrible. These were not normal enemies with ships and soldiers. These were beings that called themselves gods. They were monsters with power beyond anything normal people could understand. They could move stars, eat planets, and make entire worlds bow down to worship them. Tae-min stopped at a huge window and looked out at the weapon testing ground. In the distance, a bright flash lit up the darkness. Another god-killer weapon had been fired. The Void Piercer was their newest creation. It could tear holes in reality itself and destroy things that should not be able to die. Commander. Sora appeared beside him. Her body was made of living crystal that changed colors as she moved. She was from the Vorthak people who had been the first to create weapons that could hurt the so-called gods. Her people had paid a terrible price for this knowledge. Half of their worlds had been destroyed before they learned how to fight back. Sora spoke in her musical voice that sounded like wind chimes. The translation device in Tae-min's ear changed her words to his language. We have confirmed another successful test. Admiral, the reality breaker, worked perfectly on the captured god fragment. It screamed for 17 minutes before it finally died. Tae-min nodded his head. The screaming was important. When gods died, they made sounds that no living thing should ever hear. But hearing those screams meant the weapons worked. It meant they could kill things that claimed to be immortal. They walked together toward the great meeting hall. Other beings moved through the corridors. Some walked on 2 legs like Tae-min. Some crawled on many legs. Some floated in the air. All of them were here for the same reason. They had all lost worlds to the gods. They had all been forced to create terrible weapons to survive. In the meeting hall, 12 different races sat around a table made of black stone that came from a dead god. The table itself was a weapon. If any god tried to touch it, the stone would drain their power and turn them to dust. General Mi Young stood up to speak. She was from the machine people called the hegemony. Her body was made of metal and glowing circuits where others had blood. Her voice came from speakers in her chest. We have received reports from the Outer Rim. 3 more worlds have been attacked by the entity known as the Star Eater. Our fleets arrived too late as always. Scientist Hyun-woo buzzed his wings nervously. He looked like a giant insect with 6 arms and compound eyes that could see in many different colors. His people were the smartest in the galaxy, and they had created some of the most deadly god-killing weapons. The Star Eater is different from the others. It does not demand worship. Like most gods, instead it simply devours everything. Stars, planets, entire solar systems. We have been tracking it for 500 years, but it moves too fast. The Star Eater was one of the worst gods. They called it the Devourer of Suns, because that was what it did. It would arrive at a solar system and begin eating the star. When the star died, all the planets would freeze and everything would die. Then the creature would move on to the next system. It had destroyed over 1,000 worlds and showed no signs of stopping. Dr. In-ho raised one of his tentacles to speak. He was from a water world and had to wear a special suit to breathe air. His people had created the consciousness destroyer's weapons that could attack the mind of a god. Our latest scans show the Devourer heading toward a new target, a small system on the edge of known space. The 3rd planet shows signs of primitive life. Admiral Tae-min felt tired. He had been fighting gods for most of his long life. He had seen worlds burn and billions die. The worst part was that the gods seemed to enjoy it. They fed on fear and worship and death. Some gods demanded that people pray to them. Others simply destroyed everything they found. But all of them treated normal living. Beings like insects. Commander Sora changed colors, showing her worry. This primitive world will be destroyed like all the others, unless we can get there first. But our fastest ships would take weeks to reach that system. The Devourer will arrive. In days, Captain Jae-ho spoke up from the back of the room. He was young for a ship captain. But he had already fought 3 gods and lived to tell about it. He had scars on his face from god fire, and one of his arms was mechanical after losing the original in battle. What if we used the new hyperspace tunnels? We could cut the travel time in half. The hyperspace tunnels were dangerous. They let ships travel faster than normal, but many ships had been lost in the swirling energy. They were only used in the most desperate situations. General Mi-young calculated quickly with her computer brain. Even with the tunnels, we would arrive after the attack begins. The primitive beings will be dead before we can help them. Young-soo, who was the youngest member of the Alliance, spoke for the first time. He was barely an adult by his people's standards, but he had already shown great skill with communications. Maybe we could warn them, send a message telling them to evacuate their world. The others looked at him with pity. Taemin spoke gently. You do not understand, Young-soo. Primitive peoples cannot fight gods. They do not have the weapons or the knowledge. When a god arrives, they either worship it or die. Usually both. The meeting continued for hours. They talked about new weapons and battle strategies. They shared information about god movements and attack patterns. But in the end, they all knew the truth. They were always too late. They could kill gods. Yes, but only after those gods had already destroyed countless worlds. As the meeting was ending, an urgent signal came through the communication system. Officer Dong-ho appeared on the main screen, his face pale with shock. Admiral, we are receiving strange signals from the system under attack. The primitive world, the one with the developing life forms. Sora leaned forward. What kind of signals? Officer Dong-ho looked confused. The signals appear to be weapons fire. Sir, massive weapons fire. The primitive world is fighting back. The room fell, silent, fighting back. That was impossible. Primitive worlds did not fight gods. They could not fight gods. No single planet civilization had ever survived a god attack without help from the Alliance. Taemin stood up slowly. Show us. The main screen changed. To show long-range sensor readings from the distant system came flashes of light that could only mean one thing. Weapons were being fired. Lots of weapons. And somehow, impossibly, the devourer of suns was not moving forward to eat the star instead. It seemed to be pulling back. General Mi-young ran the numbers through her systems. The energy readings are consistent with nuclear weapons, primitive fusion devices. How is this possible? Hyun-woo buzzed his wings faster. Nuclear weapons cannot hurt a god. We tested this centuries ago. They are too weak. But the sensors did not lie. Something was happening in that distant system, something that had never happened before. A primitive world was not just fighting a god, it seemed to be winning. Admiral, Taemin made a decision that would change everything. Prepare the fleet. We go to this system immediately. I want to see these impossible beings who dare to fight gods with primitive weapons. As the Alliance ships prepared to jump to hyperspace, none of them could imagine what they would find. A small blue world full of stubborn beings who had never learned that some things were too powerful to fight. The meeting hall on Earth was nothing like the Grand Alliance chambers Admiral Taemin was used to. It was a simple room with wooden tables and chairs that looked like they might break under his weight. The walls had pictures of humans from different parts of their world and flags with many colors. Commander Elena Vasquez sat across from the 12 alien representatives. She looked completely relaxed in her simple military uniform. Her gray hair was pulled back and her dark eyes studied each alien visitor with calm interest. She poured a dark liquid called coffee into small cups and offered them to her guests. So you folks have been hunting space gods for 3,000 years, Elena said, taking a sip of her coffee. That must keep you pretty busy. Admiral Taemin struggled to understand the human's casual attitude. Divine entities are the greatest threat in the galaxy, Commander. They have destroyed countless civilizations. They demand worship through terror and consume entire worlds for sustenance. How can you treat this matter so lightly? Elena shrugged her shoulders, which seemed to be a human gesture. I guess we just see things different. When something shows up and threatens to destroy our world, we don't spend much time worrying about what it calls itself. We just figure out how to kill it. In-ho leaned forward with his tentacles moving in confusion patterns. But Commander, the entity that attacked your world was a Class Alpha divine being. It possesses power over stellar mechanics and reality manipulation. Your primitive weapons should have been completely ineffective. The human woman laughed, which was a sound that confused the aliens even more. Primitive maybe, but they worked fine. Look, the way I see it, power is power. Whether it's some cosmic monster or a tank rolling toward your city, you point your weapons at it and pull the trigger. Commander Sora changed colors rapidly, showing her bewilderment. But surely you recognize the divine nature of the entity, the psychic pressure, the reality distortions, the ability to manipulate matter at the quantum level. Alina nodded. Sure, it was powerful and scary, but scared and impressed are two different things. When that thing showed up demanding, we bow down and worship it. Our response was pretty much universal. We told it to go to hell and started shooting. Scientist Hyunwoo buzzed his wings in agitation. This is impossible. Every species in the galaxy experiences divine awe when confronted with entities of such power. It is a basic neurological response that promotes survival through submission. Maybe that's your problem. Elena replied, we don't do submission real well. Here on Earth, when someone claims to be a god and starts making demands, we usually get suspicious. Gods, emperors, kings, cosmic monsters. They're all just bullies with better weapons. General Mi Young processed this information through her mechanical brain. But submission to superior power is logical. Commander, resistance leads to destruction, while compliance offers potential survival. Alina refilled her coffee cup and looked at the machine general. You know, we had plenty of people on Earth who thought like that. Kings who said they ruled by divine right, dictators who claimed they were chosen by heaven. Guess what happened to most of them? The aliens looked at each other with growing confusion. They had studied thousands of species but had never encountered beings who naturally rejected authority based on power alone. Young-soo spoke, up nervously. Commander, what did happen to these human rulers who claimed divine authority? They got voted out, shot, overthrown, or just ignored. Elena answered, history is full of people who thought being powerful made them special. Turns out, when enough regular folks decide they don't want to be pushed around anymore, power stops meaning much. Captain Jeho tried to understand this concept, but Commander, divine entities possess abilities that transcend normal physical laws. They can manipulate space, time, reality itself. How can you simply ignore such power? Elena stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the city. Below them, millions of humans went about their daily lives completely unaware that aliens were visiting their world. Look out there, she said. Every one of those people has been dealing with authority figures their whole lives. Parents, teachers, bosses, politicians, police officers, military commanders. She turned back to face the aliens. The thing is, we learned a long time ago that having power over others doesn't make you right. It just makes you powerful. And powerful. People can be wrong, stupid, corrupt, or just plain mean. Dr. Inho studied the humans with his advanced sensors. Commander, our analysis shows that when most species encounter divine entities, they experience neurochemical cascades that promote reverence, fear, and submission behaviors. How do humans resist this? We don't resist it. Elena replied, we just get mad instead when something threatens our families, our homes, our way of life. We don't feel awe, we feel anger. And angry humans are pretty good at finding ways to hurt whatever is threatening them. The alien representatives tried to process this information. Every other species in the galaxy had eventually learned to fear and respect divine entities. It was what kept them alive long enough to develop god-killing weapons. But humans seemed to have skipped that step entirely. Commander Sora flickered through several color patterns. Commander, your species has never developed proper reverence protocols. How do you maintain social order without recognition of legitimate authority? Oh, we recognize legitimate authority, Elena said. Authority that serves the people, protects them, helps them build better lives. But authority that demands obedience just because it has power, that's not legitimate, that's just bullying. Admiral Taman felt his worldview shifting in ways that made him uncomfortable. Commander, when the divine entity made its demands for worship, what was your people's exact response? Elena grinned, which showed her teeth and somehow made her look more dangerous. Well, the official response from the United Nations was to reject the entity's demands and prepare defensive measures. But the unofficial response from about 8 billion humans was a lot more colorful. Most of it can't be translated into polite company, General Young calculated probabilities. But commander resistance to divine entities typically results in total planetary destruction. Your species' survival suggests either incredible luck or some unknown defensive capability. Elena shook her head. Neither really. We just decided that if we were going to die, we were going to die fighting. And it turns out when you refuse to be intimidated by something, it loses a lot of its power over you. The aliens realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. A species that had never learned to fear gods, not because they were too primitive to understand the danger, but because they fundamentally rejected the concept that power alone granted authority. Young Su asked the question that was bothering all of them. Commander, what happens when you encounter something that truly cannot be defeated? Something with absolute power. Elena looked at him with those calm, dark eyes. Then we make it hurt enough that it decides to find easier targets, she said. And if that doesn't work, we make sure it knows that even if it wins, it won't. Enjoy the victory. The meeting continued for hours, but the aliens left with more questions than answers. They had found a species that treated cosmic gods like neighborhood bullies, and somehow, impossibly, it worked. As they returned to their ships, Admiral Taman wondered if the Alliance had been approaching the god problem all wrong. Maybe the solution wasn't building better weapons to kill gods. Maybe it was learning how to refuse to let them be gods in the first place. Dr. Inho floated in his water tank inside the human research facility on Earth. His tentacles moved excitedly as he watched the brain scans on the large screens around him. Beside him stood Dr. Sun Hee Kim, a human scientist with short black hair and bright, intelligent eyes who had been studying the alien visitors for weeks. The discovery they had made would change everything the galaxy knew about fighting gods. Dr. Kim pointed to the colorful brain images projected on the wall. These scans show the neural activity of your people when exposed to recordings of divine entity encounters, she explained to the assembled alien researchers. The patterns are remarkable. On the left side of the screen were brain scans from Alliance species exposed to god encounters. The neural activity showed massive spikes in areas associated with fear, awe, and submission. The colors were bright red and orange, indicating high stress and the overwhelming urge to bow down. On the right side were human brain scans from the same recordings. The patterns were completely different. Instead of fear centers lighting up, it was the areas associated with anger, problem-solving, and aggression. The colors were deep blue and green, showing determination rather than terror. Admiral Taman studied the scans with fascination. Dr. Kim, what causes this difference in neural response evolution? Dr. Kim replied, humans developed in an environment where blind submission to authority usually meant death, predators natural, disasters hostile tribes, survival meant fighting back against overwhelming odds, not accepting defeat. She pulled up another set of images showing human history. These are images from our past: wars against tyrants, revolutions against corrupt kings, battles against impossible odds. Every generation of humans has had to decide whether to submit to power or fight against it. Commander, Sora flickered through confused color patterns. But Dr. Kim, how do you maintain civilization without proper authority, recognition? How do your people organize without natural hierarchy? We do recognize authority. Dr. Kim smiled, but only legitimate authority. Power that serves, protects, and helps people build better lives. Authority that demands obedience just because it has power, we call that tyranny, and we have a long history of fighting it. Scientist Hyunwoo examined the data with his compound eyes. Dr. Kim, your brain scans show that humans actually become more aggressive when faced with displays of overwhelming power. This should be an extinction-level trait. Dr. Kim laughed. That would make sense, except for one thing. When humans get angry, we don't just fight blindly. We get creative. Our anger makes us think harder, not less. We start looking for weaknesses, ways to hurt whatever is threatening us. The research team had been working for months studying human psychology and comparing it to alliance species. They had discovered that humans were not immune to the psychological effects of divine entities, but they responded in exactly the opposite way from everyone else. Dr. Inho pulsed with excitement through his water tank. Dr. Kim, we have tested this theory on volunteer alliance personnel. Exposure to human psychological training methods shows remarkable results. They begin to exhibit resistance to divine authority patterns. The training program had been Elena Vasquez's idea. Take alliance soldiers and teach them to think like humans. When faced with overwhelming power, instead of asking how to submit or appease, they learn to ask how to fight back. Young Su, who had volunteered for the first training session, reported his experience. Admiral, when I watched the God Encounter recordings using human mental techniques, I felt something different. Instead of the usual fear and awe, I felt what humans call righteous anger. The results were spreading throughout the Alliance fleet. Soldiers who completed human psychological training showed increased resistance to divine manipulation. They stopped seeing gods as beings to be feared and started seeing them as problems to be solved. General Mi-young had undergone mechanical modifications to process human emotional patterns. The results are measurable, she reported. Divine entity psychological attacks show 60% reduced effectiveness on trained personnel. Morale and combat effectiveness increased significantly. But the real test came when the Devourer of Suns returned to Earth, apparently having overcome its initial fear and seeking revenge against the humans who had dared to hurt it. Captain J-Ho watched his instruments as the massive god creature approached Earth again. Admiral, the entity appears larger than before. Its power readings are off our scales. It has been feeding on fear from other worlds to strengthen itself. The Alliance fleet took position alongside human vessels, but this time their weapons had been modified. Their god-killing technology now incorporated human tactical principles. Instead of trying to destroy a divine being, they were designed to hurt and anger. A very dangerous bully, Elena Vasquez's voice came over the communication channels. Alliance vessels, this is Earth Defense Command. Target the bright spots and keep shooting. Don't try to be fancy about it, just make it hurt until it goes away. The battle was unlike anything the Alliance had ever experienced before. Their weapons had been designed with reverence, even for their enemies. They built god-killers with the understanding that they were fighting truly divine beings, but the human-modified weapons were different. They fired with what could only be described as spite. Each shot carried the message that the target was not a god, not a being worthy of fear or respect, just another bully that needed to be taught a lesson. Admiral Tae-min found himself laughing as he gave firing orders to his crew. Human Defense Command. This is Alliance Command. Engaging target with maximum disrespect. The Devourer of Suns reacted to the modified attacks in ways they had never seen before. Instead of the usual divine fury, it seemed confused. Its attacks became less coordinated. Its movements showed something impossible. Uncertainty. Commander Sora monitored the god's energy patterns. Admiral, the entity is experiencing what can only be described as self-doubt. Its reality manipulation abilities are fluctuating, Dr. Kim explained over the communication channel. Gods need worship, fear, and respect to maintain their power. Even the terrified, respect of their enemies feeds them, but contempt and spite drain their strength. The battle continued for hours, but slowly the tide turned. The Devourer of Suns began to shrink, its stellar fire dimming, as weapons fired with human-style contempt struck again and again. The creature that had destroyed 1,000 worlds was being diminished not by superior firepower, but by the simple refusal to treat it as anything special. Young Su reported from his station. Admiral, the entity is attempting to communicate. It appears to be offering negotiation terms. Elena Vasquez responded immediately. Tell it we don't negotiate with cosmic bullies. If it wants to talk, it can start by leaving our space and finding a job that doesn't involve eating stars. The Alliance officers watched in amazement as the Devourer of Suns actually began to retreat again. But this time it was different. The creature was not just fleeing, it was diminished. Its power visibly reduced by the simple act of being treated like A common criminal instead of a terrifying god, Dr. Inho, made the observation that would be remembered throughout galactic history. We have discovered something remarkable. The gods derive their power not just from worship, but from being treated as gods. When that reverence is removed, they become vulnerable in ways we never imagined. The human approach was spreading throughout the Alliance fleet. Soldiers who had spent their lives in terror of divine entities were learning to see them as Elena had said, just bullies with better special effects, as the Devourer retreated toward deep space. Admiral Taman realized that the Alliance had been fighting the war against gods all wrong. They had been trying to build weapons powerful enough to kill divine beings. But humanity had taught them something far more valuable: how to refuse to let their enemies be gods in the first place. The Alliance fleet dropped out of hyperspace expecting to find nothing but floating rocks and dead silence. Instead, they found something that made no sense at all. The Devourer of Suns was there. Yes, but it was not eating the star. It was moving, away from the small blue planet like it was running from something. Captain J-Ho stared at his control screens with wide eyes. The readings could not be right. The massive god creature that had destroyed 1,000 worlds was retreating, its burning body was smaller than usual, and the fire around it flickered like a dying candle. Admiral Tamin stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking out at the impossible scene. Through the great windows, he could see the Devourer slowly moving toward the edge of the solar system. But between the god and the blue planet was a line of tiny metal ships. They looked like toys compared to the cosmic horror they faced. Commander Sora appeared beside him, her crystal body flashing bright colors of confusion and disbelief. "Admiral, my sensors show those primitive vessels are maintaining attack formation. They are not running away." The small ships were nothing like Alliance warships. They burned chemical fuel to move through space. They had simple metal hulls with no energy shields. Their weapons looked like they belonged in a museum from thousands of years ago. Yet somehow they had made a god run away. General Mi Young connected to the fleet communications network. Her mechanical voice carried data. That made no sense. "Analysis complete, Admiral. The primitive vessels are using nuclear fission weapons, kinetic projectiles, and chemical explosives. No advanced technology detected." Scientist Hyun Woo buzzed his wings rapidly as he studied the readings. "This is impossible. Nuclear weapons cannot harm a divine entity. We have tested this theory extensively. The energy output is insufficient to damage their reality matrix, but the evidence was right in front of them. The Devourer of Suns had wounds, dark spots on its burning surface where something had actually hurt it. The creature that could eat stars had been damaged by weapons that could barely destroy a small asteroid. Young Soo worked at the communication station trying to understand. "The signals coming from the primitive fleet, Admiral. I am detecting radio transmissions from the third planet. The beings there are coordinating their attack." The communications were strange. They were not like the formal military channels the Alliance used. Instead, they were filled with odd sounds and what seemed like emotional expressions. The translation computers had trouble understanding many of the words. Admiral Taimin made a decision that would change galactic history. "Open a communication channel to the primitive fleet. I want to speak with whoever is commanding those ships." The communication took several minutes to establish. The primitive beings used very basic radio waves instead of quantum entanglement communication. Finally, a voice came through the speakers, clear and strong. "This is Commander Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Defense Force. Unknown vessels, identify yourselves and state your intentions in our solar system." The Alliance officers looked at each other in surprise. The primitive being had spoken first and demanded information from them. This had never happened before. Usually when they met new species, those beings were either worshipping gods or running from them. "Admiral." Tamin responded carefully, using the formal protocols. "We are the God Killer Alliance. We detected the divine entity attacking your world and came to provide assistance." There was a pause before the human answered, "Divine entity? You mean that big angry space thing?" "Yeah. We already took care of it. Turns out concentrated nuclear bombardment really messes up their day." The Alliance bridge fell silent. The human had called a cosmic god. a big angry space thing. This was either the bravest primitive being in the galaxy, or the most foolish Dar. In-ho connected to the communication channel Commander Vasquez you do not understand. The entity you engaged is a Class Alpha divine being. It has destroyed over 1,000 worlds. Your primitive weapons should not be able to affect it. The human voice came back sounding almost amused, Primitive. Maybe, but they work just fine. We hit it with everything we had and it started backing off real quick like. So we kept shooting, Commander. Sora studied the retreating devourer with her advanced sensors. The entity is indeed damaged, Admiral. Multiple impact sites across its surface. The wounds appear to be regenerating, but slowly. This should not be possible. Captain. J-Ho checked his tactical displays. Commander Vasquez, how did you know to attack the entity? Did you have advance warning? We got about 6 hours notice when our deep space telescope spotted it coming. Elena answered. The thing was making a lot of noise too, demanding we bow down and worship it or something like that. So we told it where it could stick its demands and started loading our missiles. The casual way the human described rejecting a god's demands made the Alliance officers feel dizzy. No species in galactic history had ever responded to divine threats with insults and weapons fire. The normal response was terror, followed by desperate attempts at appeasement. General Mi-young processed the tactical data. Commander, what is your species? Total military strength. How many worlds do you control? Just the one world. Elena replied. Earth is all we got. But we got about 8 billion people on it, and most of us don't like being threatened. 8 billion beings on a single world. This was another impossibility. Most species spread across multiple planets once they developed space travel. Having billions of individuals on one planet should have made them vulnerable, but somehow it seemed to make these humans stronger. Young Su had been analyzing the human communication patterns. Admiral, their language contains many emotional expressions and what appear to be aggressive declarations toward the divine entity. They show no signs of fear or reverence. Admiral Taimin felt like his understanding of the universe was crumbling. Commander Vasquez, would you be willing to meet with us in person? We have many questions about your method, sure, Elena answered. Come on down to Earth, we got coffee and food ready. Just a warning though, our gravity is a bit heavy compared to most worlds, and our air might be thick. For you folks, as the Alliance ships moved toward the blue planet, their sensors detected something else unusual. The entire world was covered with cities, and the electromagnetic signature showed billions of individual minds all connected through a global communication network. Dr. In-ho studied the readings. Admiral, this species has achieved planetary unity while still confined to a single world. They have created a global government and communication system. This level of cooperation should be impossible at their technological stage. The planet itself looked peaceful. Blue oceans, white clouds, and green land masses. No signs of the massive military installations that should be needed to fight gods. Yet somehow these humans had driven off the devourer of suns with nothing but determination, and nuclear weapons Commander Sora watched the retreating god creature with fascination. The devourer is moving toward the outer system, Admiral. It appears to be genuinely fleeing. This is the first time we have observed a divine entity display fear. Captain J-Ho prepared his ship for atmospheric entry. Commander Vasquez, we are ready to land. What are your people called? Humans, Elena replied. And don't worry about formal protocols or anything. We keep things pretty simple down here. You folks want to see how we deal with cosmic bullies, come on down. As the Alliance ships descended toward Earth, none of them could imagine that they were about to meet a species that had never learned to fear gods. They were about to discover that sometimes the most advanced weapon against divine power was the simple refusal to be impressed by it. The humans waited on their blue world, completely unaware that they had just solved a problem that had plagued the galaxy for thousands of years. 1 year after first contact with humanity, the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The God-Killer Alliance had been renamed the Cosmic Defense Coalition, and their headquarters now orbited Earth, where human advisors worked alongside Alien military leaders, Admiral Tae-min stood in the new command center watching reports flow in from across the galaxy. The walls displayed star maps showing God encounters throughout known space, but the numbers were dropping steadily. Divine entity attacks had decreased by 70%, and those that did occur were far less destructive. Commander Elena Vasquez, now wearing the insignia of Strategic Advisor to the Coalition, addressed the assembled leaders through holographic projection from Earth. The reports are coming in from all sectors. She said our anti-authority training programs are working better than we hoped. The training had spread to hundreds of worlds. Alliance species were learning what humans called the art of not being. Impressed young soldiers who once trembled at the mention of divine entities now spoke of gods with casual disrespect that would have horrified their elders. General Mi Young reported from the Outer Rim territories. Divine encounters have changed significantly, Admiral. When gods arrive at populated worlds now, the local populations often respond with organized resistance rather than worship or flight. The mechanical general displayed tactical data from recent encounters. On the Calarian colony, World Nexus Prime, the population refused divine demands and began broadcasting insults at the entity through all communication channels. The god retreated after only 6 hours. Captain J. Ho had just returned from patrol duty in the frontier systems. Admiral, we encountered 3 separate divine entities this month. All 3 attempted negotiation before resorting to threats. 2 actually offered payment for worship services. This was unprecedented throughout galactic history. Gods had always demanded worship as their right. Now they were discovering that beings who refused to be impressed were immune to their usual tactics. Some divine entities had begun trying to bargain or even hire worshippers. Young Su, now promoted to lieutenant commander, had established the new Cosmic Bully Response Division. Our rapid response teams have successfully de-escalated 47 god encounters this year, he reported. Most entities retreat when faced with organized contempt and mockery. The human approach had evolved into a systematic strategy. When gods appeared at coalition worlds, the response was immediate. Civilian populations were trained to respond with collective ridicule, while military forces deployed weapons designed to annoy rather than destroy. Dr. Sun Hee Kim continued her research from Earth, finding new applications for human psychology. The neurological changes in Alliance species are permanent, she reported over the communication link. Beings who complete our training program show lasting resistance to all forms of authoritarian manipulation. This had unexpected consequences. Beyond resistance to God's coalition, citizens began questioning other forms of absolute authority. Corrupt governments found their populations less willing to submit to oppression. Corporate exploitation decreased as workers refused to accept poor treatment. Religious hierarchies that demanded blind obedience lost followers to more democratic spiritual movements. Commander Sora, who had undergone extensive human psychological training, now flickered in colors that showed confidence rather than confusion. The transformation extends beyond military applications, Admiral. Our people report increased innovation, creativity, and independent thinking. The crystal being displayed economic data. Productivity is up 40% across coalition worlds. When beings stop fearing authority, they start taking initiative, solving problems, and creating new solutions. Dr. In Plus Ho floated in his mobile tank studying the long-term implications, Admiral. We are witnessing the emergence of a new form of civilization based on human principles rather than traditional hierarchical structures. But the real test came when reports arrived of a massive divine entity approaching the galactic core. The Void Emperor was older and more powerful than any god the Coalition had faced. It claimed dominion over entire star clusters and had destroyed civilizations that spanned hundreds of worlds. Scientist Hyun Woo analyzed the incoming data, Admiral. This entity shows power readings that exceed our previous measurements. It may be beyond the reach of our new tactics. The Coalition fleet assembled for what could be their greatest challenge. Admiral Tae-min commanded 500 ships, from a dozen species, all armed with human-modified weapons and crewed by beings trained in the art of cosmic disrespect. Elena Vasquez joined the fleet aboard the human vessel, Stubbornness, a ship whose name perfectly captured humanity essence as they approached the Void Emperor. The massive entity began its usual display of divine power. Reality twisted around the god creature. Stars dimmed, and space itself seemed to bend. The entity voice boomed across all communication channels, demanding immediate submission from the inferior beings who dared approach its presence. The coalition response was swift and coordinated. Instead of the usual fear-filled prayers or desperate bargaining attempts, every ship in the fleet began broadcasting the same message. This is Admiral Taemin of the Cosmic Defense Coalition addressing the entity currently throwing a tantrum in our space. You are disturbing lawful commerce and civilian traffic. Please move along, or we will be forced to make you move the void. Emperor paused, clearly confused by this response. No species had ever addressed a god with such casual dismissal. Elena Vasquez's voice joined the broadcast. Big, scary space monster routine noted and ignored. You have 10 minutes to leave Coalition space before we start shooting. And trust me, you really don't want us to start shooting. The god entity attempted its most powerful psychological attacks, waves of terror and awe, designed to reduce entire populations to worshipful submission. But the coalition crews had been trained well. Instead of fear, they felt only mild annoyance at the interruption to their duties. Commander Sora reported from her station. Admiral, the entity appears to be experiencing confusion. Its reality manipulation. Attempts are becoming increasingly erratic. Youngsu monitored communication channels. The Void Emperor is demanding to speak with our leader. It seems frustrated that we are not responding with proper reverence. Elena answered this herself. We don't have leaders the way you understand them, buddy. We have people who do jobs, and right now our job is to make sure you don't hurt anyone. So either move along peaceful like or we start making your day really unpleasant. The battle that followed was unlike any in galactic history. The Coalition fleet fired weapons loaded with concentrated spite, while broadcasting a continuous stream of insults and mockery. The Void Emperor found itself not in a cosmic battle between divine forces and mortal beings, but in what humans called a really annoying argument with people who refused to take it seriously. After 6 hours of sustained contempt, the Void Emperor did something unprecedented. It asked for terms of surrender. The Coalition response was swift. The entity would leave Coalition space, immediately cease all attacks on inhabited worlds, and consider finding productive employment that did not involve terrorizing civilizations. Admiral Taemin watched in amazement as the most powerful god ever encountered actually agreed to these terms. The Void Emperor retreated toward the galactic rim, its power visibly diminished by the simple act of being treated like a cosmic nuisance rather than a divine being. Dr. Kim, final report to the Coalition captured the magnitude of their achievement. We have learned that gods are not divine beings with absolute power. They are bullies with impressive special effects, and humanity has been dealing with bullies for our entire history. The galaxy was forever changed. The age of cowering before cosmic entities was over, replaced by an era where even gods had to follow the rules or face the consequences. As Elena often said in her speeches to Coalition forces, power without responsibility is just bullying, and we don't negotiate with bullies.